Great, just happened.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. And this is our second webinar, and we're going to go through what happens behind closed doors. So before we go into that, I'm just going to hide the panel so we can get rid of that. Let's do a few introductions first. So Sarah, over to you first.
Okay, so a brief introduction to me. My first career was as a criminal prosecutor, so qualified as a barrister, and then joined the Crown Prosecution Service, stayed there for a couple of decades, prosecuting, but also going up the management route, starting with a small team, and then my last position was, or role was, as unit head in the Southwest branch. So had quite a lot of conflict involvement during that time, mainly from other lawyers. And I have to say, dealt with it with varying degrees of success, particularly initially. And I then, as unit head, got a chance to train as a mediator, so an internal mediator. And for a couple of years, I'm running my unit, but I'm also mediating in house every few months. And each time I did, I just thought, I like this more than my day job. So I stopped the prosecuting, set up mediation in the workplace, and I haven't looked back. So for me, I'm just a woman who loves a bit of conflict, really. Um, I mediate. That can be two people, it can be a small group, it can be a larger team. I do conflict coaching, working one on one with people who may be struggling with either a present or a past conflict, or even how they're going to manage conflict in the future. I used to do some investigation work as well. I'm pretty much stopped that now. Um, but I do other workshops. But probably my most favourite thing is teaching other people to mediate. Perhaps a bit more about that later. But yeah, so I teach the national qualifications in mediation. And one of my star pupils, who I'm about to hand over to, was, of course, Lizanne.
I'll flash get you everywhere, Sarah. Thank you. So my career is slightly different. I joined the John Lewis Partnership back many, many years as a management trainee and worked through their programme through the management ranks, fell into HR, spent the rest of my career in HR, and then going into other corporate companies. During that time, I also have trained as an NLP coach and a master coach. And then towards the end of that corporate career, I then decided to become self-employed, trained with Sarah to become a workplace mediator, decided I liked that more than I did the HR side of things, and shut that business down. And I'm now purely, my day-to-day job is workplace mediation. I'm trained to deal with team facilitation, two-party mediation, conflict coaching. I also am now qualified to supervise new mediators. And Sarah and I also work together in team conflicts on a more regular basis. So why do we do these webinars? Why have we started them? Well, the philosophy is we feel that we've got a lot of experience and expertise that we want to share with everybody out there. We want to support individuals that are dealing with conflict and can't always see a way forward. And we want to be able to give you those insights for you to step back, think about it differently, get those light bulb moments, and then see if you can find a way forward. We care about what we do, and we want to be able to support those that are still finding their way through those journeys. Why do Sarah and I work together? Well, you can see already that we've got very different backgrounds, and we've also got very different behavioural styles. So I'm very detailed, Sarah's very creative, and actually we work beautifully together. The contrast breaks our strength, and Sarah and I, particularly when we're doing team facilitation, when you've got lots of different individuals in the room, we're able to tap into them individually. and we like to think of ourselves as a VA team. So let's get straight into the webinar. What is a workplace mediator? Well, the way I like to look at it is that when everybody else is running out the room and in the opposite direction, when conflict's going on, we're walking into the room and we're shutting the door behind us. It's not far from the truth, but we enjoy it. We enjoy the moments towards the end where everybody sees the light and that we see the harmony and the relationships build together. It's a real moment that you can't describe. There are lots of different types of mediators out there, and I didn't know that when I started in my journey as a mediator. So workplace is only just one of them. And for those of you who don't know, there's also civil and commercial mediation, which is more on the legal side of things. There's SEND mediation, which is more in the educational sector. There's family mediation, which is relationship and also child and divorce. And they get very involved in the court side of things. Believe it or not, there's things called pet mediators. You name it, that they're all different in some sense, but all very similar in the same. So the foundations of being a mediator are the same, but then they're all regulated slightly differently. And some have more litigation involved in it than others. Now, workplace mediation isn't regulated as much as we would like it to be. And there is also the element of the fact that tribunals are being backed up at the moment. And I strongly believe that workplace mediation is going to be utilised more and more. And in my opinion, it's going to become more compulsory before they're even able to go into the employment tribunal system. So why would we get contacted to mediate? First of all, there are two different types of mediators in the workplace. There are external mediators, which is what Sarah and I are, that we aren't fixated into any particular company. We can go anywhere and we can mediate any company, any individual. Internal mediators are particular individuals that have been set up by an organisation and they have a bank of mediators that they utilise for different elements of the business. They still have a need for external mediators, particularly if they're a senior case or they are a complex case of any nature, really. So, question to you all, why do you think we get contacted to mediate? So use the chat function and pop in your answers in there. Let's have a look.
Desperation stage has been arrived at. Love that one. Too true. Objective approach, yeah, great. No one with the necessary skills in the organisation, absolutely. Objective view to get people talking, yeah. No time, capacity, resource, fear, love it. Run out of options, yes. Traditional grievance process isn't working. Avoid long, costly HR processes, yeah, all of these. All of these. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for that. So let me cover, what I would say are the key reasons why we get contacted. I mean, the first is there's been a relationship breakdown, and that relationship breakdown is impacting on the business productivity at some level, usually at quite a considerable level, so that the organisation feels they have got to do something about it. Next reason, the communication's broken down. So really often, Lizanne and I are working with people who have not spoken to each other for a period of time. Even the social niceties of saying good morning have gone, or one person is refusing to come into the office to even see the other person or pass them in the corridor. So you've got a complete communication breakdown going on. Next thing, grievances. Now, if we had it our way, you'd have to mediate before a grievance investigation to see if you could resolve it through an informal approach rather than going down a grievance. Because once you start an investigation, once you go through that, it only cements positions even further. People get more entrenched, more upset, more sickness absence, etc., without taking into account, the amount of time and the cost and the stress of doing that. But right now, we still do get contacted at the end of grievances rather than at the beginning. I mean, almost always when we dig into a mediation, there is misunderstanding, misperceptions, and because the parties are not talking to each other, because that relationship's broken down, they don't address them, and in fact they build on them and cement them even further. What else? Teams just falling apart in all sorts of ways. I mean, I'm sure from your own experience, there will be teams where you've got factions within teams. You've got teams where the staff are against the manager, or you've got teams where perhaps two team leaders within a team are fighting with each other and creating division. So it comes in all sorts of forms, could even be two different teams. And it's certainly an area for Lisanne and I that we really like working in. And then this last one, which, I noticed came up in the chat, where the organisation doesn't have someone who can do this role for them, for the organisation internally. And several times you've put the word objective in the chat. I'd say potentially impartial is more accurate. The challenge is always, and for those of you with an HR background, you'll know, that when things start going wrong, you get pulled in and you start knowing about it fairly early on. And perhaps even if you're not dealing with it yourself, you know about it from a colleague in HR. And so you already are pulled into that. And the key with mediation is that everybody involved, the parties involved, must have trust that the mediator is going to be impartial and objective when they're taking that forward. And of course, the other problem is people think they're mediating, because that word is now used a lot, isn't it? When in fact they're not mediating at all. They're not being impartial. They're not being fair with both parties, or they're telling them what they should do. And, there is no mediation in real terms taking place, and it makes it worse. And both Lisanne and I have got quite a lot of experience of getting that call where we've tried to sort it and it's now got worse. Oh, back over to you, I think, Lisanne.
Okay. So although we can't guarantee mediation, we do have a high success rate. Both Sarah and I can certainly say that we've had 100% success rate with all the team cases that we've dealt with. But we have a 90% success rate of all the other two-party mediations. And I have to say, that is a good result. And I'm sure there's many mediators that can also say that as well, that it's worth giving the opportunity to do this process before going down a formal route. Okay, so what Sarah's going to do now is go through a case study, a real case study with you of how a mediation could take place.
Okay, so popcorn ready. Here's the case study involving we've got Sarah Allen joining us. Welcome, Sarah. Right, you've come in just as we're about to start our case study. So if you saw our LinkedIn post, you'll know it involves two chefs, one of them a Michelin star chef. So let me set the scene. This was a real case. I have anonymised it, obviously, so that the organisation, the people involved, could not be identified. But it was a real case that I did a number of years ago. And it does hold the record even now as the fastest mediation that I've done. So here we go. Tuesday is Tuesday in 1 week. And we have at this organisation a Michelin star chef who is the head chef and a second in command. So I'm going to call my head chef, I'm going to call him Bill, and second in command, I'm going to call Joe. What happens on that Tuesday is Joe comes into work first. Joe is going about his business, preparing food. Bill comes in a little bit later. He loses his rag with Joe, swears, shouts. Joe walks out, and Joe tells HR on that Tuesday, I am not coming back to work unless I get an apology, and that doesn't ever happen again. Okay. HR are thinking, what are we going to do? We need these chefs. We need them working. Our staff need feeding. So on the Wednesday, I got the call, and it was a phone call saying, we've got this situation. Do you think mediation could be appropriate? And they gave me literally that background of what I've told you, that Joe's walked out, said he's been shouted at, sworn at by Bill, and won't return unless there's an apology and this is resolved. So I asked a little bit more background. I found out that Bill was relatively new to the organisation. He'd been there about 6 months. Joe, on the other hand, had been there over 5 years. And that the two of them hadn't had problems before. And there were no sort of reasonable adjustments, extra things that we needed to take into account. The priority was to get this done quickly. I checked whether HR had spoken to Joe and Bill to see if they were up for mediation, and they assured me that they were both open to trying it. So I talked through the process, we agreed where we would hold it, and we set it up for the next day. So Tuesday it happens, Wednesday we've talked it through, Thursday we're mediating. And what that looked like was rooms within a hotel, and at an early start, and I had a couple of hours with Joe on his own in confidence and with Bill on his own in confidence, in which I unpicked with them what had happened from their perspective, what was the impact of what had happened on them and how they were feeling, and what did they want to achieve from the mediation. You know, what was their resolution? And we talked all that through so that I really could see what had gone on through each of their eyes. As part of that, you not only want to give them a good listening to, but you also want to move the parties so that they're in what we would call resolution ready place and ready for a joint discussion with the other party. And to do that, some of the things that really work are what, you know, Lizanne and I would call as those sort of magic mediation questions. And I think a couple of them, probably that particular session was, and one I use so often, is what do you think the other person will say to me or has said to me about what happened? And it's often the first time they've actually stopped to think actually what might have been going on for the other person. And the other question that's really key, I think, is to ask how important it is for each of the parties to resolve this. Because to be quite honest, if it's not important to them, you have to wonder why they're there. But usually they say it is very important. And that in itself shifts the mindset towards, I do want to resolve this, which leads into that joint meeting. So that's a brief summary of what happens in those one-to-one meetings. We had some lunch, and because we were in a nice hotel, it was a very nice lunch, but they were in separate rooms. The two of them had still not spoken since the bust up on Tuesday. So Thursday afternoon, now's the time to get them together, bring them in the room together. As mediator, we set that up. We set up the confidentiality. We ask them if they want to agree any ground rules for that meeting. We'll often suggest that maybe they want to consider not interrupting each other. You won't be surprised to know when I asked Bill what he wanted, he said he didn't want anybody walking out of the meeting. And when I asked Joe what he wanted, he said he didn't want any swearing in the meeting. So we agreed that we wouldn't interrupt, we wouldn't swear, and we wouldn't walk out. That was how we started. And then each of them has a little bit of time at the beginning of the meeting to talk through and headline for the other what it is they want to talk about, why they want to talk about it, and what they hope to achieve from the mediation. And sort of, around 5 minutes, and each of them has that as uninterrupted time. It then, not only does it start the meeting in a very controlled way, but it also effectively sets an agenda. And it allows both parties for the first time to just hear directly from each other. From there, we get into the main discussion. And in that discussion, the mediator's role is to facilitate so that they really talk things through. They clear up misunderstandings. You get the communication going. And you then move towards resolution. And again, some magic questions potentially that seem to work in almost every mediation. One of them I would usually ask is, so if you could turn the clock back to that Tuesday morning, what, if anything, would each of you do differently now? And it's a great reflective question, but it just allows them to think about, okay, what behaviour could be different? And for Joe, he said, look, I wouldn't have walked out. I should have stayed and we should have sorted it out. And for Bill, he openly said, I shouldn't have sworn at you. I should have checked what you were thinking before I started panicking about the fact that a meal that we should have prepared was not ready. And then we moved on to, and because the crux of this, the crux of this was about a meal that was very important for Bill to prepare and have it, perfect, because the owner of the business had said how important it was. The key here was that had not been fully communicated to Joe. So the other sort of key question was, if you had the same meal next week, for example, or next month, what would you both like in place to ensure that you weren't back in this position again? And again, they talked that through. And coming from those sort of questions, you get the beginning of an agreement and a resolution. And the resolution for Bill and Joe was quite simple, really. It was a few points. One, they apologised to each other, and that was important to each of them. Bill for swearing, Joe for walking out. But then they agreed that when there were these really important meals coming up, that there would be communication ahead and expectations would be shared. So Bill could be really clear what he wanted Joe to do. And then they talked as well about what if on the day either of them had had something difficult happen, which Bill had that day. He'd had a rather stressful start to the day, how they would communicate and how they could support each other. And they even took it further then to talk about how they were going to involve other members of staff. And I am pleased to say, by the end of Wednesday, they were shaking hands, they got their agreement, and Joe was back at work on Friday morning. And I did go back to this organisation about a year or so down the line, and both were still very much there and very much working well together. So there we go. The magic of mediation. Back to you, Lizanne.
So there may be some burning questions about this case study. So what we're going to do is park them for right now. And right at the end, when we've concluded the webinar, we'll throw those opportunities out for you to ask any questions about, or ask Sarah about any of the elements of that case study. So, Sarah, you're going to talk about the training programs that we've got coming up.
I am indeed. Look, I've been training people to mediate since 2013, and it is just one of my favourite things to do. And Lizanne and I are now working together on this. So we teach the national qualifications in mediation. There's 2 levels. There's a 6-day programme, which is the level, sort of the accepted industry level, if you're going to say I'm a mediator, whether externally or as an in-house mediator. And then there's also the introductory programme, a 2-day mediation for managers programme, where you really understand what mediation is, have your first go at it, and can probably start using those skills in low-level conflict. So, if you are at all interested and it's been on your to-do list or want to know more, please, send us a message or put something in the chat, because we're really happy to just talk about it. There's no hard sell here. We don't want you to come on the programme unless it really is the right thing for you. So we're always happy to talk it through first. And we've got one in March coming up, and then again in June in Bath, both of them. And if you're listening and thinking, oh, maybe we would like to train a group within our organisation, we can also offer it in-house. And again, that's a further chat. Back to you, Lizanne.
Thanks, Sarah. So we want to give something back. So we want to thank you, for attending this webinar. And we hope that you've got a few little nuggets of wisdom from Sarah from that case study. But if you've got some conflict going on in your workplace and you really don't know where to go with it, Sarah and I are offering 6 20-minute free consultations to jump onto a call with us, talk us through what's going on for you, and for us to be able to give you some advice. So we're running 2 sessions. One is today, and Sarah's doing that between 1 and 2. And I'm doing a session on Monday between 12 and 1. So what I'm going to do right now is put the link in the chat, if I can get it up.
And while Lizanne is doing that, Nina, in answer to your question, do you have these questions written down, please? I do. I actually have a whole question bank that is part of what we go through on the mediation training. So we have it's about using the questions at the right time. And there are, it's a 2-sided sheet, basically, of different questions that often will unlock things. So potentially I can give you those questions now. My concern would be you also want them in context. And then, Kush, did you have the resolution written, which the 2 parties signed up to and owned? We did write it down. We wrote it down in the session, but actually the 2 of them, because there were only sort of 3 key parts to it, they both actually said, I don't think we need it as a formal agreement that we now sign or put anywhere else. They were quite simple things about increased communication effectively. So they didn't feel that they needed it in that way. Whereas sometimes, yes, we absolutely do write it down, and sometimes it's shared.
Absolutely.
And yeah, Nina, I'm sure we can share those questions. That's not a problem. I can put them in the chat.
Well, thank you very much for attending. We just want to mention our next webinar, which is in March, date to be confirmed. Interesting topic for you. What we're wanting you to think about is, are you looking as an organisation to launch an internal mediation programme? So are you looking to shift your grievance culture into a resolution culture? And if that's the case, come along. We're going to be talking about that, and you will also receive a free business case template that you can present to your board of directors. So I'm going to stop the recording and give you the opportunity to ask any questions.